doing the awesome, awkward intro thing. I'm Casey.
I'm Ashley. I'm Taylor.
And we're sort of looking at how certain variables, like income, education, and availability of resources, affect food choices. And super fancy, long-winded title aside, I'm going to open with a little bit of a story, because I'm a writing major, and that kind of feels like cheating to me. When the family of four, each of them stuffed tight into NASCAR t-shirts and Budweiser hoodies, walks into the Chinese buffet, the wait staff brace themselves for impact. Two children watch with wide, vacant eyes as the server, a thin woman in black trousers, walks over to fill their glasses. She motions for them to sit in a booth near the deep-fried egg rolls. The man, reaching over the wide gully of his stomach to readjust his belt, asks, "How much extra for the ice cream bar?" So again, I just opened with a bit of a story because it's like cheating to me, and telling stories is my favorite thing. But mostly because there's this really, really set socioeconomic stereotype for poor people kind of going to a buffet and just eating their weight in whatever's available. And this mold of the obese family stretching $1 and their waistlines at the local buffet, rather than buying fresh fruits and vegetables, may be set in a really rigid socioeconomic stereotype, kind of like the kind we saw play out in Hillbilly Elegy. But there's reason to believe that this construct is more, less, and maybe exactly what you think. Meaning that even if this fancy title that we had has to deal with food availability among the poor, it's often situated around the problem of obesity. But it's a rather complicated issue, and the narrative is often portrayed as being very straightforward. So, because everyone likes a video, we have this awesome HBO documentary, The Weight of the Nation, Poverty and Obesity, and we're going to play a few minutes.
So here in the South Bronx, this is the lowest income county in New York State. We have the highest rates of obesity. This map is showing in the neighborhood we're in now, more than 30% of the people being obese. Very high prevalence of diabetes. Just a short distance away here in Manhattan, the Upper East Side, where it's the highest income neighborhood in the city, we have very low prevalence of obesity, very low prevalence of diabetes.
2/3 of adults citywide are overweight or obese, but in the darkest areas on this map, close to 90% in some cases of adults are overweight or obese. And you can see in the areas that are lighter around University City, lower rates of obesity, and look at all the healthy food sources. So all the produce cars, the supermarkets, the farmers markets. And when you go back to these areas that have higher rates of obesity, you see many fewer sources of healthy food.
There's been a recognition of the seriousness of obesity as an issue for the whole country. But if you look at the state of Tennessee in Nashville, which is where we're located, it is a crisis level here. I mean, we rank at the bottom.
About 1 out of 10 adults is walking around with diabetes. If you look at people who have not graduated from high school, it's 1 out of 5.
The red spots in this particular map are the highest rates of poverty are.
We know that in this area, almost 1 out of every 3 children is considered to be overweight or obese. And this is an area, as you're saying, with poverty. The average household income is less than $25,000 for a family of 4.
Orange County, California is an extremely wealthy county, one of the wealthiest counties in the United States. Orange County has a very high number of parks and park space. In fact, per 1,000 residents in Orange County, there are 41 acres of parks and open space, but not in Santa Ana. This red circle reflects the proportion of kids that are overweight or obese. Look at the difference between that circle and this tiny little circle in Irvine. And all of this yellow which reflects relatively high rates of wealth right next door to these deep pockets of poverty, overweight, and obesity.
So what is happening here is that we have data that can document that not everybody has the same resources to fight diseases. And at the end, the epidemics are reduced to the pockets of poverty.
Take the committee on just a very brief journey from the perspective of a local public health practitioner. So the death certificate is actually a pretty good source of data to tell what somebody died of. You can tell what age they were when they died. You can tell what their race, ethnicity is, and you can tell where they lived. And those 4 pieces of data can tell you a lot about patterns of death in a community. Where you live matters, and it matters a lot. Another way of putting this is, does your zip code matter more than your genetic code? This is Baltimore, Maryland, where they have a census tract down near the Inner Harbor with a life expectancy of 62 years, and another life expectancy up in northern Baltimore, 82 years, a 20-year life expectancy difference. This is Cuyahoga County, Cleveland, where we thus far have found the greatest disparity in life expectancy. This is Huff, an inner city neighborhood with the average life expectancy of 64 years. And 8 miles down the road is Lyndhurst with a life expectancy of close to 90 years. Understanding what drives that disparity is going to help us understand what is driving a chronic disease epidemic. It's going to help us understand the tools and strategies to get underneath the obesity epidemic. Obesity is the primary driver of chronic disease, a big contributor to diabetes, cardiovascular disease, stroke, and some cancers. And so with our healthcare costs of over $2 trillion, our nation's costs are enormous.
In a low-income neighborhood, there's a different food environment. Not only do people make less money, they're surrounded by lower quality food, it's difficult to get fresh vegetables, and they're more stressed. And so it brings up this question of what degree of free will do people really have when they're in a certain controlled environment, and until we can understand that there are large social and economic forces that predict obesity, we're never going to solve the epidemic.
There is a design, there is an urban design that is making people sick. There is an urban design that is making people obese, overweight. There is a design that is making people develop chronic diseases.
There's no healthy places in my neighborhood. The most that we have is like Chinese, McDonald's, KFC.
With all the burger joints and deals and 99-cent this and it's 99-cent everywhere.
If I have $3, you go buy 2 burgers for 99 cents each and a soda. For us, it's more accessible to go to the fast food.
I got a family of 5 kids, and it's hard to just do it on the cheap food, you know?
There's limited resources. I pick what I can afford to feed my family.
You know, to get to the grocery store and to find the healthier foods, then to have to prepare those foods and the expense, it's almost out of the picture for someone in my situation.
If you were confined to living in a particular neighborhood because of the amount of money that you make, obviously the choices that are in that neighborhood are going to be your only choices. So
the same populations where people have food insecurity, where people worry about where.
So like the end of this video shows, they showed like the real people and their opinions on it. And another important quote that the one man at the conference talked about was that, is your zip code more important than your genetic code? Which is one thing that we one. But next we're gonna talk about the homework. Oh,
So we gave you
that.
So we gave you some, was the homework. And with those people's sort of voices in mind, of course it looked like this, we just kind of asked you to do a rough tally of like where you had been able to eat in the last few days. So with those people's voices in mind, the people who don't really feel like they have a lot of food options, maybe talk amongst yourselves for a minute about what kind of choices you were able to make, or we can sort of talk about it like how many of you were able to make deliberate choices? Like how many of you felt like you were like, yes, I'm going to eat at this place?
And like we're getting to the end of the semester, so keep in mind that
No,
we can have a conversation about things outside of this week.
Yeah, for sure. I had Scholar Day yesterday, so I've done nothing but eat at like stop and go places, and I feel like absolute garbage. Like I feel like not an adult human being.
Yeah, so go ahead and take a look at those questions, and then we're going to go around and kind of share out loud after you.
I may make all the recipes. It's like my favorite thing. I may make all of these. No. It's just wait. But thank you. I know it's like super professors give out a work and they're like, oh, we're not collecting it. But that's exactly what we do. So we get it.
Because we talked about it so much.
Yeah. So I'm like, yeah, you were right. Yeah, we did that.
I've been starting to eat worse, and then I'm also
I was looking at some
Okay, so I'll just throw it out there. We were gonna run through all the questions, and we still totally can. But who wants to say anything
About the homework or these questions?
Yeah, about any of this? Thoughts or feelings or concerns? Thank you. Man in the back.
honestly, like as the school year kind of progressed, I've been getting lazier with cooking. So like you said, for like Scholar Day, like I went to Burger King and then also Dairy Queen at night. I do also usually feel like garbage.
Oh no, like to celebrate my Scholar Day being done, I was like, so I need comfort food and I need to feel like I'm a child again, so I went and got a big old box of McNuggets. And I felt no shame. So from what I understand, and I was eavesdropping, it's what I do. I heard a lot of talk about eating for convenience sake. That's obviously what happens. Chipotle, B&B, anyone? The cafe, Jimmy John's, freakishly fast.
So this is like not a question on there, but I always think about this. We made it a separate like tally on the sheet. Do you feel like when you're eating Chipotle, like you're eating healthy? I mean, obviously you are eating a little bit healthier, but do you feel any shame for still not making food? Like not really. So that's why I made it separate, because technically, like you could call that. I mean, yeah.
So there's a cultural difference. You're still stopping at a restaurant to pick something up, but it feels more like cooking. Like it doesn't feel like.
Because there's like little lettuce that hasn't been bagged. Which like I think makes it real food.
Like the tomatoes are vegetables technically.
Alright, so maybe like this could, you guys might talk about how you feel about either the questions or the homework. We can go back and forth to the slides.
I would definitely say like being on my own in school and then like schoolwork, athletics, that kind of thing. But like at home, I didn't think I valued how much my mom like cooked for me and like where it came from. Like I had like my mom would provide for me in that way, and like that's like something I wish doing when I get older, like on my own, like kind of like out of the stress of school, graduating thing that I like take the time to like start cooking.
I love you dearly, and I'm so excited for you to feel that way. But as someone who is like out on their own, although I still have school stuff, so I fully feel you. No, it never goes away. There are still times when you're like, I'm eating McDonald's, and that's just how my life is right now. Thoughts? Concerns?
I mean, personally, I try to go to the grocery store as much as I can because I find it to be more affordable that way.
Right.
And then it's easier because I don't have to go anywhere to eat. Maybe I'm hungry, just make it at home. So I try to do that most often. But there are times, like you said, where I just want Chipotle.
Yes, I could definitely shamefully share that I go grocery shopping every Sunday, but a lot of times I go grocery shopping and then on the way back I'm like, I'll get Chipotle on the way home.
I did an adult thing, so now I get Chipotle. You already said a thing. You guys did.
I found that I did a lot of my eating out on the weekends, and I try and keep it that way a little bit for like date nights, hanging out with friends and stuff like that.
Right.
And when I don't have time during the week, I actually end up cooking more. Trying to eat a little healthier.
It's not easy. Yeah, snacks for you. I have a cheat day too. Yeah, okay, you got one, and you have children. A child.
Yeah, so two things. One is I eat a lot better now that I'm married. Not because she cooks, we take turns cooking, but I just do better. When I lived here in Alliance and she was teaching, at this time was stressful for us grading. It was Domino's, Subway, a lot of Domino's because they would bring it, right? So I just sit there. The other thing is in grad school I discovered that cooking put me in a much better mood. Just the act of doing it. And I didn't even realize that I bought this book, How to Make Things in 30 Minutes. It takes me an hour and a half still. I was still batching it. But it was, it was cool to do that. But it takes some stability in our life, I guess, too. A couple of dollars does help, too. But grad school I didn't have much. But
I say it's interesting to me with the people who talk. I definitely think the woman who's I have a family and it's still cheaper, but for convenience sake, if I'm by myself, I'm not going to eat with anybody else anyways, so I'm going to go do this. But if I had the accountability of a family that was going to be staying at home, I think it's interesting that she is still the best because I think the accountability also really changes.
I would say one thing too that plays into that is sometimes I go grocery shopping and I think I buy too much and I waste a lot.
So it goes bad.
Yeah,
That's why
fresh fruits, fresh vegetables.
Right, because you really can get them 1 or 2 at a time. You can get the bags up on the trees. I'm thinking all these where you can get them.
Yeah, this is extremely disgusting, and I didn't really want to share this, but I grocery shop since one of the first week, since probably February, because whenever I go grocery shopping, everything goes bad, and I waste so much money. So yeah, I just if I do one, I guess sometimes if I was gonna do one meal for my friends or something, I'd buy all that stuff and cook it, but then even those leftovers just go bad. So it's just I just think of that.
I agree. With only living with one other person, it's hard because you don't eat all the food fast enough.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting too. We don't really acknowledge you could be going to the grocery store and not making it. I go to the grocery store and buy those healthy choice vegetables and chicken all combined because if I buy the vegetables separate, I'll eat half of all of it and then throw the rest away. So I think that would be interesting to next time to consider are you going and still buying prepared food at the grocery store or are you going and buying?
Yeah, we kind of grouped it all together. Like a hungry man. Yeah. Like a hungry man meal. They're from the grocery store.
You could be going and
but they're
buying
not groceries.
We don't know.
They're not groceries.
What about you?
Yeah, kind of the same thing. I feel I enjoy cooking, but at this time of semester, I'm just too lazy. So I just go and get something and it makes me feel bad about myself. But I just really just don't have time to cook anything.
You see that reflecting.
Also, until we were told to write this down, I didn't realize how much I do go places. When I have a full kitchen and I'm paying for it here, but I still go and eat at Applebee's or Big X or something. I don't actually use the kitchen that I
Right. Especially with drinks, this didn't account for drinks, but I have a coffee maker and I buy coffee almost every day that I'm out.
That's a big one too. That coffee has some good shit.
Okay. I guess maybe the last question to consider, just we talked about finals and stuff, but if you could think of outside of the college sphere, people in the video, what makes them choose convenience over. Yes.
So the one lady was talking about like having to drive to the grocery store, how far away it was, and that was one of the reasons that she chose convenience. Whereas here, I think in town we don't really think about that because we have like the farmers market and the grocery store like pretty close to us.
But still, I know students who don't drive. So unless they have
That's
a
true.
friend, which again in the college atmosphere, it's really easy to know someone who drives. Be like, could you be a bro and drive me to the grocery store? But for some people, they either don't have that friendship circle, or they don't, like even all of their other friends either don't drive or can't afford to own cars at all. So if you want to go grocery shopping, you have to ride the bus. And I don't know if any of you have ever been on the bus. It's a harrowing experience in and of itself when you don't have a load of clothes. There are people who live on the bus, and you can go and meet them. And they will tell you to get off the bus.
Okay, so we kind of shared our opinions about that, and based on this, you can see that convenience plays a large role in the decision-making process. So here in Alliance, we kind of know what convenience looks like. You get Chipotle, you order something, you walk somewhere. There's many options within your reach in the city limits, especially if you can drive. I looked at a cross-sectional study done by Vogel, and he examined how education may affect convenience in different people groups. The article was titled, "The Relationship Between Dietary Quality and the Local Food Environment Differs According to Level of Education Attainment." Wrong title. And he examined how different communities and the markets within them are affecting the problems that their society and the people within them are facing. So the research basically discovered that the type of food outlets affects the people living there. Great. But the thing that was a little bit different was that it looked at how this was hindering or encouraging individuals' health, independent of their risk factors. So independent of who you are, how many children you have, anything that could be affecting them. And ultimately look to see if they could overcome these circumstances based on what was going to be available within their city. So the key factor they examined was the socioeconomic status of individuals. And this was super important because when you're looking at low-income people, they typically would not have as big of a sphere as people who are in the middle or upper class. For example, here, I can get my car, and let's say Alliance didn't have a grocery store, I could drive to Camden. Whereas somebody who low socioeconomic status cannot have a car is bound to what is here, which for us is good, but in a lot of cities they don't have those kind of things.
As someone from a low socioeconomic status, I have a car, but it is not the kind of car you could safely drive to Camden.
So backwards.
I will
They're real. So what they ultimately found was that that was true. Just like when we looked at Hillbilly Elegy, they don't have a grocery store, they have a convenience store. So there's stuff there. You can buy food, but because of your limited transportation and how big your sphere is, it's really just not possible. And then they looked at the factor of education, which they found didn't have a direct correlation, but you can understand that if you are educated, you're more likely to be living somewhere that offers those kind of markets. So though the research didn't find that, you can kind of see how outside of the specific research that they did, those things all really play into each other. Okay, so then as we're going to explain about local foods, buying local refers to food that is produced close to a community in which it will be consumed. Buying local is not only beneficial for the body, but for the environment and the economy of society. An educated person must then possess a variety of knowledge. The same kind of knowledge that when we went around the room, talked about, you know you're making the choice. Like, you know when you're driving home, you're buying Chipotle. I know that. I've made the educated choice to do so. So you are possessing the knowledge to do that. And ultimately, you have to come to understand three big factors, which is how it's affecting your health as well as your environmental conditions and economic sustainability. So when we look at these three things, we can see better food is better, leads to better human health. less fuel would be less pollution, and markets in the neighborhood also increase the number of jobs that is offered. So these attributes the educated individual will know we seem to be out of reach for an anonymous grocery store, or multinational food corporations, or a convenience store next door, while a small market can work to accommodate all three of these. Despite the benefits we see of these, we also see shortcomings of a small market, like green market farms that you can go to, because it has a varying demand, and we live in Ohio, so you can't buy corn year-round at the market. You just can't. So that is something that is also taken into consideration when we're thinking about being educated, is knowing the people in California can pick whatever they want whenever they want to, and you live where it snows, so you don't get the luxury of that choice. And I mean, that's the main thing about two grocery stores. Like, our prices are different too, depending on the time of year. So that's also taken into consideration. So ultimately, while the educated individual knows that buying local is best, and they can see all the benefits named above, as well as the shortcomings, you're ultimately reminded that the luxuries aren't always there for us and for anybody of a different status. Here's a cool thing that I made. I watched.
So the first thing that I focused on was more like the economic sustainability that she talked about. The article was, is local food more expensive, a consumer price perspective on local and non-local foods purchased in Iowa. So this was from the Leopold Center of Sustainable Agriculture, and it attempts to address the dilemma that people are faced with when trying to decide between local and non-local foods. So it was important for the study to define the term local, and they determined that people didn't really see a difference between in-state or nearby. So for the purposes of their study, they considered anywhere in-state to be local. So this data was taken on 5 different days and 4 cities and 4 different venues, and the product prices were compared by the pound. So the study found that the average price per basket of vegetables was actually more at the supermarket. The average cost for a non-local basket of vegetables was $1.39, while the average cost for the local basket of vegetables was $1.25, as shown in the figure from the study. Alright, so however this price gap between local and non-local vegetables becomes more abundantly clear if the consumer were to buy a full pound of the 8 vegetables used in the study. This is shown in this figure, with the non-local vegetables costing $1.60 more than the local vegetables. And the authors explain that local price advantages mainly stem from competitive pricing of vegetables like zucchini, summer squash at the farmer's market. So these price advantages could be due to factors such as abundant supply, seasonality, or weather, which you just touched on a little bit. Individually speaking, tomatoes, sweet corn, eggs, ground beef, summer squash, and zucchini all follow the same trend. While vegetables like cucumbers, string beans, cabbage, sweet onions, and bone-in pork chops are found to have higher prices at the local venues. So overall, the answers to whether it is cheaper to buy local or non-local is it depends. While most vegetables and meats are found to be cheaper at local markets, others are not. And an educated person has to use critical thinking skills in order to break down these types of studies and make decisions about whether their eating habits that best suit their lifestyle. So the next study that I looked at was from the NRDC, and a possible reason for the trends local foods being cheaper was that local foods require less transportation. So in this article, they discussed the environmental impact of transporting non-local food.
Keep going.
And the camera's not on to anything.
Keep going.
So some foods that are organic are made with non-organic ingredients, which doesn't mean they're not organic. And some local produce that's just grown in someone's backyard, which is made with no, which can be grown with no fertilizers under no non-natural conditions, is not considered organic because it's not certified by the USDA. So you can go ahead and think about how much sense that makes. But the price sticker of organic actually is very important because part of these healthy food choices and not being available has a lot to do with price. And this idea of price really drives a wedge between customers of a certain socioeconomic status and organic foods. So Bjørn Lomborg, director of the Copenhagen Consensus Center, contests that the stereotype of the family sort of waddling their way towards cheap food isn't just real, but the obvious outcome of the organic food market is systematic cold shoulder to the poor. According to Lomborg's article, which was written for the New York Times in defense of a study released by Stanford, there are little to no benefits in eating food that has just been labeled organically grown. The Stanford study backs this up by showing that by kind of doing a micro research of other research available, which kind of showed some gaps in what they were studying. So what they kind of got out of it was that there are no base level nutritional benefits to eating organic as opposed to just eating like regularly priced fruits and vegetables. But like everything else, no one agrees. So Mark Bittman, also of the New York Times, absolutely hates the Stanford study, saying that if the decision between buying organic or conventional foods was based solely on nutrients available, you could claim that, based on nutrients, Frosted Flakes are better for you than an apple. The Pew Research Center seems to agree with Bittman, saying that food may be too cheap. One of their studies showed that while poor people still spend about a quarter of their disposable income on food, as opposed to the 10% that other socioeconomic brackets tend to pay, they eat about 400 calories more than even the poorest people in the 1970s. And to further complicate the issue, Pew also released a study that shows our idea of the family of the China buffet may be completely unfounded or founded by circumstance because obesity and poverty don't always go together. Again, in completely against the awesome video that we watched. So when it comes down to reported figures, we actually seem to be split. The majority of obesity ran higher for wealthy middle-class men, but higher for low-income women, though maybe not as much as the narrative that we've kind of been presenting would make you think. So it's weird that everything points in one direction, the narrative that I read at the beginning, and yet it seems to be happening and not happening, and happening for a whole bunch of different, complicated, makes no sense reasons. So the question kind of begs itself. We talked about organic. So what does an educated person do? Which is really what this whole thing has been about. So they have to adapt to what's available, and not only to the food sources around them, but to their lifestyles. Like, we're all in college, we're all super busy at this point, and the available information. They should know that there is information that even needs to be sought. I know this is like the last thing you guys wanted to do in the middle of the week was to listen to a presentation. But like I said, I'm an awesome eavesdropper, and I love watching when no one thinks that I'm watching. And some of you seem like fairly interested in some of the stuff, so some of this may be new. So as educated people, you may now understand that keeping track of where you're eating, or just knowing that there's no way I'm cooking food at this point, is a way to be educated about like what's going on in your lives. So an educated person must also know how to be flexible, because again, like you all talked about, it's not always feasible to sit down and have a home-cooked organic meal. Let's be real with each other. But you also have to leave room for compassion to other people's situations. Because while there are stereotypes kind of flying around, an educated person does not necessarily have to feed it.
Thank you. If there are any thoughts.
I'm just wondering if any of you guys are vegetarian or vegan.
No, I'm not. No, I actually hunt, so on the other end of that spectrum.
But vegetarian. But she also talked about how she'd be more likely to eat hunted meat, like venison, because one, she knows that it's usually locally sourced,
right.
And it's usually more humanely killed than the stuff that you can buy, like at grocery stores.
Woman I intern for, she's not vegetarian, but she won't buy meat from stores. She has a farm, and they raise cows, they don't milk them, they raise cows and chickens, and that's what they eat. So it's interesting, because a lot of the reason people are vegetarian is because they don't want to eat meat, it's because of how they're treated. So.
And how bad they usually look at it.
And everything they put into the actual meat.
It's I have stuff for her and all they eat is egg.
Yeah. I mean, I went vegan last summer for a few weeks, and the reason I did was just like not even, I mean, I love animals, but I didn't really think I could make a change, but like I did it because of everything they put into this. Like, it's just the amount of like, I don't know.
Like preservatives.
Yes,
There's a
and
ton of
just
stuff
everything
about
like that, like
CO2.
it's a lot. Yeah.
You feel gross.
Depends who you buy it, but yeah.
Did you guys look at the difference between like organic and like natural food or like the other labels they put on it, or just specifically organic?
Specifically organic, I think, which is like local. Because organic is starting to get such a huge rap, like because it's sort of taking over. Like I shop at Aldi's, and the organic section is getting huge because the demand for it is huge. But then it bears looking into, why is the demand huge? Are there nutritional benefits? Stanford says no, but then they also admit that people buy local and organic for other reasons, like not being exposed to pesticides as much, or local organic meat is supposed to be farmed in ways that like attempts to recreate their natural habitats. So that's why some people choose to eat organic.
We kind of talked about that too, because like if you go to like Walmart and you look at the apples, like these ones, like you look at a bag of regular apples and a bag of organic apples, and the regular apples are like there's 3 times as many, but they're the same price. But you could also go to like the local farm next door, which is probably just as good as the organic apples are that you'd be paying for at the grocery store. But they don't have a label on them because they're not certified, like she said.
So with all this complexity, do you have, like, do you believe that first video, that that's pretty accurate?
Yeah.
Even in the Stanford, did that disagree?
No, the Stanford study was that there's no nutritional benefits to eating organic as opposed to just eating more fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Because that whole video was looking at like kind of how big their sphere is and how many of them are obese, which is kind of like their correlation with what they're eating. Whereas we looked more at like just what's being offered. Like, so you talk like you live downtown, like my cousins live outside Detroit. They get downtown Detroit. Like, a lot of parts, like you're like walking, you're like now walking 20 blocks to the grocery store.
Right.
So like the availability, not necessarily the personal.
Right. We liked the video because it kind of took into account all of the factors that we sort of looked at individually. What's available, education levels, and like prices, shit stuff.
Economics of it.
It was a good way to get it started, to introduce the topic. Yeah, nice.
I felt like the pollution chart was pretty interesting to see, because like I remember like growing up as a kid, like my parents would drive 40 minutes to Cleveland to go to what's it called?
Westside Market?
Yeah, Westside Market. We'd all pick up like fruits and vegetables, and we'd go home and we drive to the local butcher and all that stuff. And then we'd go to Giant Eagle to pick up some cereal. So
It's not even just that, but it's also been transported there from somewhere else. Like, you know what I mean?
So it was like it was lesser of a price for us, but then again, like, just use
It
all
is
this
a
gas to go
little,
over.
that chart. It is a little like skewed though, I have to say, because they also like for like the beef, like they're also taking account into like the CO2 that they emit during their lifetime, like as a cow.
Flatulence.
Which is
a lot of CO2. Yeah, potatoes aren't really, potatoes, like, they exist as like a way to be natural. Potatoes don't have a lot of flatulence.
Do you guys enjoy this?
Yeah, probably more than we should have.
Then I like feel sad though when I go home and eat like easy mac. I'm so educated.
Well, actually,
Not doing anything about it.
so I don't know. I mean, Chipotle seems to me, I haven't studied it better than McDonald's.
Yeah, it's at least cooked there, like not just reheated there.
Yeah. Yeah, it probably depends on what you get. But you're right, you're going to do your best.
Yeah.
And it is true, as you make more money, a little bit more, just enough so that you have some more stability, it's easier to do this. One of the, you guys tied economics, socioeconomics, and it's true. If you got a couple of bucks, it's easier to do. You have some stability. You have more people in your household, that can help. It's true. So if and I don't have this urge as much anymore. I used to sometimes, especially when I'm really busy or really dreary weather, I want to get a quarter pounder. Just out of nowhere, I gotta. Now, if I do that, I got to explain to somebody where that money went. I got to say why I'm not hungry when I get home. So having somebody else to be accountable to is there's a time. But I think giving yourself permission to blow at least once in a while is also good. So.
I think it's the season thing sort of thing, because I was even thinking, my grandpa used to live in Florida, and you think about people down there, like, everything, majority of like what he ate, was right there.
Yeah.
Like, he ate fish, he ate fruit, like, there's not a lot that was coming from somewhere else. Like a lot of restaurants that have that, like, oh, the fish is caught, you know, that kind of thing. So, I think we didn't obviously get ahead of that, but.
Yeah, this is a huge topic, but it's true. Where you live has a big impact. Nice job.
Thank you.
Good job. All right. So, you have your homework assignment for next time. We're going to reflect on the good old days in high school. Listen to 21 Pilots while you're doing something.
I am older than 21 Pilots, could we not?
Do you want the
I'm older than you.
I like
You need to log out, so yeah, please.
Thank you for snickering at my fog hat joke yesterday.
Yes. Oh. So I was, first of all, really good job.
Thank you.
On both that and this. Good job with that. Good job.
Thank you. Thank you.
But, so I was in, my sister and I were in Northern California going up a highway through the redwoods, and all these Harleys passing us. And there's just tons of them out there, and like we're kind of pissed off because we're trying to enjoy the redwoods, and then these motorcycles. We get closer to where they're getting more and more of them. Turns out they're all going to
Someone's funeral.
Fog Hat concert.
Oh, nice.
Somewhere in the middle of the redwoods, and I go, oh yeah, there they are.
Because we're local.
You guys are free to go about your business.
Because we're local, honestly. A lot of my uncles have been buried from, like, through Cassidy, through Christian. They still remember. I couldn't have been any older than 5 or 6. My mom actually made me leave early because my uncle Ronnie was a biker. So his funeral was full of bikers. And they actually started having the kegger out. Which they kept it together enough that I guess Cassidy's like they allowed it to go on, but like revving their motorcycles because that was their salute.
Yeah. Hey.
Oh yeah, no,
Oh yeah. Is it okay if I do?
Did it end up?